Hello, my name is Rhonda Tees, and I am pleased to introduce this week's pastoral personality, Dave Wilson. I have only known Dave for about 16 years, so I'm still learning all about him. But I do know that his family has lived in Pakenham for generations, that St. Andrew's has been his church all his life, which is probably why he works so hard to see it flourish, that he was a teacher and school principal, a part-time farmer, and loves to sing in the choir at St. Andrew's. But rather than the standard introduction, I'd like to do something a little different and describe Dave based on the letters in his name, D through N. So, D is for devoted to his family, his church, and his community. A is for articulate, often brilliantly so. V is for vexing, no need for further explanation here. E is for efficacious in fighting for and accomplishing the things that he believes are important. W is for worldly. Dave stays abreast of the news of the world, especially if it relates to politics. He is in his glory this week with the resignation and appointment of Canada's finance minister and the Democratic convention in the States. I is for his irrepressible spirit. L is for loquacious. It has been recently pointed out that Mr. Wilson has the gift of gab. Dave can strike up a conversation with anyone about anything. S is for social. Dave loves to be with people of all ages. He can also sometimes be rather somniferous. When he goes on and on about something, I can start to feel a bit sleepy. O is for obliging. Dave is always and quite cheerfully willing to help others. N is for nationalistic. Dave loves his country, even if it's not perfect, and even when the right party is not in power. It's a shame that there is no M in Dave's name, as Dave is very musical with a fine bass voice. So please enjoy this Pastoral Personalities interview with my friend Dave Wilson.
Anyway, where do you want to start here?
Well, start at the beginning. Excuse me. You say you've been in the church for a long time. When did you start?
Well, the history would be that the Wilsons, along with the Hudsons and the Gillans out in our corner of the country, were of the Methodist persuasion,
Oh,
and they've been involved in the Methodist Church. Probably since its inception out here, and I wouldn't know exactly when that was.
hmm.
I know that they were involved in building a Methodist church in Antrim in 1901.
Oh, okay.
The Methodist church in Pakenham was there before that. So my family's been involved on that side. My mother was a Presbyterian,
Hmm.
and while they went to church, they weren't involved in the same degree that the Wilsons were. So my initial memories, of course, were of a little kid going to Sunday school,
Hmm. Okay.
and what we call the Sunday school room, where we have coffee
Yes.
on Sunday morning. We would meet there at 10 o'clock, the kids, and I would guess there were 35 children,
Wow.
and all those partitioned rooms around the back of that, of course, were Sunday school rooms, and a teacher would take 6, 8, 10 kids into one of those rooms
Hmm.
after the large group session, and they'd meet in those rooms. And so those are amongst my earliest recollections.
Yes.
My father sang in the choir all his life,
Hmm.
and it's funny how these things go. My mother was tone deaf,
Uh-huh.
couldn't sing a note. So by the time I'm a teenager, my sister is singing in the choir with my father,
Hmm.
and I'm standing down in the church beside my mother who can't sing a note. So we have the sort of the two solitudes there.
I hear you. Yeah. My youngest daughter loves to sing, and my older daughter has a beautiful voice. She's got perfect pitch. Doesn't
Yeah,
doesn't like to sing at all. Just not just different temperament.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it wasn't that my mother didn't enjoy the music; she just couldn't reproduce a note. Like
Oh
it
yes.
wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So those are sort of the early recollections. Now My sister would have been involved in CGIT
Uh-huh.
as well as the choir.
Canadian Girls in Training.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so they had a choir, for heaven's sakes.
Oh,
I can
really?
remember.
Wow.
Oh yeah, there was there would be at least 15 of them,
Yeah.
and they I can remember them singing at church. My sister, another church activity. My sister married, I think it was 1963. The service was in the church, and the reception and dinner afterwards was held in the dining room downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably be one of the last wedding receptions held in the church. You know, people held them elsewhere in the community. They quit holding them in the church. But I remember that quite well. Um, my father had two sisters who lived in Pakenham, and they were both active in the church. So Mary Shaw, my cousin,
Oh, yes. Yes, Mary Shaw.
her mother was organist and choir director. Mary talked about that briefly in her interview.
Yes, she sounded like quite the musician.
Yeah, and she had a stroke.
Yes.
She had a stroke in the 1940s, so I never remember her being able to speak, never
Oh.
mind sing,
Oh.
never mind play.
Oh.
She lost it all when I was a small child, but apparently she was very, very talented. She not only could play, but she was a singer as well.
Mm-hmm.
My father's other sister, Laura, who was also married to a Scot.
Yeah.
She was active in WMS and the United Church women's things, quite active in those. And every time I go in the church, I see something that reminds me of the family, because when you look over to your right
Okay.
as a minister, in the corner where the scroll is that has the names of all those who served in the two world wars.
Yes.
The aunt and uncle who was the aunt who is the one I just mentioned, who was active in the women's groups.
Laura Scott. Yeah.
They had two boys, Don and Kenton, and both of them lost their lives in the Second World War. So their names are on the scroll over there. Now you get up to modern times, or move on a bit anyway. When Helen and I, my wife is a French Canadian and a Roman Catholic.
Mm.
So when we went to get married, we said, "How are we going to do this?" And my wife was working at Ottawa U, so we were married in the rotunda of the administration building at the University of Ottawa.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful.
With the university padre, the Catholic priest, and the Reverend Harold Davies, who was our minister here in Pakenham.
Okay.
So we had an ecumenical wedding service. Then my wife actually did volunteer work at St. Peter's up the hill from St. Andrews there.
Uh-huh. That is Celestine.
And both our girls were baptized in the Catholic Church.
Oh, okay.
But as everybody got a little older, I guess they all decided that there had to be a simpler way to do all this. So my wife just started coming to church at St. Andrews, and then both of our girls were married at the church.
Ah, okay.
At St. Andrews. One married an Anglican, and the other married a Muslim.
Right.
And when the Muslim wedding in particular was quite the do, because we had an imam come and help Heather Kincaid perform the service.
Yeah.
And let me think now. Aunt Ruth, my sister, would have sung a solo, I'm sure, at both of them. And what else? Oh yeah, Barb Armstrong was the organist and choir director in those days. So she worked really hard on the music to not only have a local Canadian side to it, but also to have a Middle East background to some of it. And so it was, and there were people there from all over the world.
Right. Was it
That's a
just the
bit of
one?
an
Was it just the one service, or were there multiple services?
no, no. It was just one service,
Yes. Okay.
just one service. But so that was a big event, and that would
Oh.
well, Janet was married in 1998, and Julie was married in 2003. So Julie's the one that married the Muslim from Saudi Arabia,
Okay.
and so Julie now like helps with Sunday school. She works with Bronwyn, and she brings her two children to school.
Okay.
Our son-in-law is not here yet, but one of these days he's going to make. He's still in Saudi.
Yes.
Uh, Other memories of the church? Well, back in maybe the 90s, we did a house tour when Heather Kincaid was still at the church, late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
We did a Christmas house tour.
Yeah.
And
I remember that. I remember that.
Pardon?
I remember that tour.
You remember that?
Sure.
And so we live in this stone home built in the 1860s by my great grandfather.
Oh, lovely.
So it's you'll get to see it on Saturday.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
And so it was one of the houses on the tour.
Ah.
And I mean that's a big production because you have to have people in different rooms in the house, you know, explaining to people when they walk through your house what this is and that is and so on and all that stuff. So that was a major production in which the family was involved. Another thing, most of my involvement has been since I retired from teaching, which was '97.
What did you teach? What did you teach, David?
I was an elementary school principal for the Carleton Board of Education.
Okay.
I don't know, 30 years or something. So I retired in '97, so that's when I joined the choir.
Okay.
After I retired, and Barb Armstrong was involved that time, and then my wife joined too. Helen joined too, and so we've been actively involved on the music side. But somewhere in there, what else did we do? I know. There was a plowing match in Lanark County.
Yeah, the international plowing match.
The international plowing match.
Yeah.
So Barb Armstrong said, "Well, church always needs money, so we're going to set up a booth and sell food."
Okay.
At that, so we got involved in that. I don't remember. That was a big activity. I'm just trying to tell you about some of the things that we've been involved in. I got a list here somewhere if I look at it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds very active. Kelty's dad was a principal on the East Coast there, and then he also went up to Iqaluit and spent a year up there. And of course, he's a great fisherman and that kind of stuff, so he loved to be out there, and that was really good. But her mother was ex emergency room nurse, and she went up there, and she often found that she was at the hospital by herself at night, dealing with all the calls and stuff. She found it a little bit stressful, but Carl would go back up there in a minute, and he certainly loved being a principal. So what did you think of being a principal? That sounds like a pretty good job.
What I think of it right now is I'm awfully glad I'm retired.
Yeah.
It was a great job.
Yeah.
I consider myself to be. I've been very fortunate. I lived in really good times and had a good job and good health and a great family, and so I consider myself really fortunate. I'll tell you another thing that the church did in the time of Tom Lowry, Reverend Tom Lowry. Tom got the church people organized and led the struggle to get 5 arches built. Now, you know what I mean by 5 arches?
Yeah, I was up that way. It's near that. I guess it's up there near that brewery. Is it the one?
Oh, you don't have to go that far. It's just you can throw a stone and hit it out of town.
Oh yeah, can you?
You just start out the Wobber Road and it's on your left.
But there is a second of 5 Arches Road or 5 Arches. Is it on that street? Is it on that street?
I don't know what the street's called, but it's the first left off the Wobber Road after you leave the village. So you can see it from the back. You could almost throw a stone from St. Andrews. And hit it because it's just through the trees up over the hill from where St. Andrews is. But when you talk to Graham Hudson, get Graham to talk about it. Graham agreed to chair the committee.
Yes.
And it was, of course, it was a community activity.
Yes.
But the Reverend Tom led it, and Graham chaired it and held it all together. And again, my wife sat on that committee. Sharon White, who was a Pakenham girl and married to a cousin of mine, she sat on the committee. She goes to the Anglican Church. She sat on the committee, and there were 3 or 4 others. It was at least a committee of 5, maybe 7. I don't remember exactly, but that was a huge community undertaking, and a real asset to the community. So that's another church-related activity that I think of when. Another one, if you go way back, and Marilyn Snedden will remember this better than I do, but back in the late 60s, after the Blakeney Church closed, the Blakeney United Church closed, they had, quite a few assets. And the Blakeney people, for the most part, came to St. Andrews. Mm-hmm. So they decided they would have a sale. And they had stuff and we had stuff, and then we encouraged people to bring stuff and sell. Like people could bring baked goods and so on. So we had this sale. I'm guessing it started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It was held on the fairgrounds on the Ball Diamond down below the school, right across the road from the church.
Yep. Okay.
Down near the river.
Uh-huh.
So we got a beautiful summer afternoon, or a fall. I can't remember just exactly when it was. And we had an auctioneer, and we sold stuff there for, I don't know, maybe 4 hours.
Really?
And then, I mean, it's starting to get dark. We moved into the church.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we moved into the town hall was still there, about where the school is today. Mm-hmm. And the old town hall. We moved in there and sold for another hour and a half, 2 hours after that. Mm-hmm. We sold a tremendous pile of stuff that day.
Wow.
And raised a lot of money for the church. So that was a big church activity that I recall.
Yeah, it's wonderful when things really go, eh? It's very exciting.
Yeah, people really got involved, and everybody contributed, and I'll go back to 1998 was the year my youngest daughter Janet got married. You don't know Janet.
No.
But she and her husband and 2 boys, they live on the farm next door to us. And I had an elderly cousin from Vancouver, Grant Wilson, who used to come home every August for a visit. Now, he was an older gentleman, and he was a bachelor and fairly shy and a bit retiring and so on. Anyway, we invited him to Janet's wedding, and I got talking to him. Of course, I didn't get much chance to talk to him the day of the wedding or anything, but I got talking to him a couple of days later, and I said, "Well, how did you enjoy the wedding?" And he said, "Oh, I had a great time." He said, it was the first wedding. He said, "It's the only wedding I've ever been at."
Really?
Anyway,
wow.
Yep. Well, he was an only child.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any cousins, I guess, close to him, and I guess his family maybe led a fairly quiet life. I don't know, because he lived just south of Vancouver, and the rest of us are all back here, so I didn't know him very well. In fact, I didn't know him at all till the 1980s, I guess. At any rate, in the course of this conversation, he says, "Why don't you do something about covering the seats in the church?" He said, "They're hard."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, it's simple, Grant. There's never enough money to be putting cushions on the seats, So he thought about that for a few minutes, and then he said, "I'll go half."
Oh.
And I said, "I beg your pardon?" And he said, "I'll go half." And I said, "Do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we'll cover the seats." Now, he was hoping that my other cousin, Bert, who died a couple of years ago, who lived in Pakenham, and I presume he was hoping we'd put up the other half.
Right.
But at any rate, we said, okay. So we went to the church council, and we said, we have a family member who's willing to cover half the seats. And they kind of looked at one another and said, here are these crazy Wilsons again. You could just see them roll their eyes. So anyway, they finally settled down and they said, okay, start at the front church and go as far as you can, and we'll worry about the rest later.
That's it. Yeah.
So I phoned my cousin in Vancouver and I said, yeah, they're willing to go for half, and if you're still interested. So he said, sure. So my cousin Bert and I found a supplier in Renfrew, and he came and measured up the church and said, as I recall it, he said, well, the whole thing had cost $7,000, so half will be 35, and we said, 35, go to her.
Yeah.
So I phoned my cousin in Vancouver and I said, okay. I said, we've got it all lined up, and I said, 7,000 will do the whole, so 3,500 will do half. So I said, you're still good, we'll go ahead. And he said, oh yeah. And he said, maybe you better go ahead and do the whole thing while you're at it.
Ooh.
So my cousin from Vancouver paid the shot to cover the seats as a result of Janet's wedding.
Yep.
Because he found the seats too hard.
That must have been some good wedding, let me tell you.
Well, it was.
Yes.
There were a couple hundred people there, and we had a great time.
Yeah.
So we covered the seats, and my other cousin Bert and I laughed about it after, because Grant dropped dead about 6 weeks after he wrote the check to cover the pews. Bert and I would have been left with the bill,
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's another thing I see every time I come into the church. I see those cushions, and I think of how they got there.
David, I have to cut this down to 5 minutes. I'm going to put the full interview, of course, on the website, on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
We're running about 23 minutes right now. So
Yep.
I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions, but kind of related to the service that I'm going to be doing today. The service is about faith, and the passage is when Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" And so, I mean, when you have this experience of faith in the church, is it connected to, part of it connected to this idea of the family and the memories and the connection that something's being passed on to you, or something that is being connected to as far as the relationship you have with the family and community and the place? I mean, what's happening there in your life?
Well, it's I suppose not easy to explain, but I think you're on the right track. I mean, my family's been involved since the early 1800s, actively in the church, and so my generation is now involved, and my oldest daughter Julie is now involved there in the church, and
Yep.
and our involvement sort of reflects all the changes in society too. We've been through all the different stages. I mean, my daughter is very different than I am, and here she is. I married a French Roman Catholic. She married a Muslim.
Yes.
So we're faith and everyday living and the church all get rolled in there, and it makes for interesting times. And at this stage, of course, the church is somewhat threatened, from a financial point of view.
Yes.
All churches, or many churches, are threatened.
Yes, many.
And what the future is, I don't know, but at any rate, I don't know. Are there any other questions I can answer for you?
Well, the other question of you're in the choir now,
Yeah.
and I'm always asked what your favorite hymn is, because I like to include that in the service. So.
Well, the hymn I always remember is the one that was sung at my father's funeral.
Yes.
And that's the Old Rugged Cross.
The Old Rugged Cross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
A man by the name of Charlie Tate, who was a tenor in the choir in my father's time,
Yeah.
sang it. So that would be my favorite. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the three of us do a nice version of the Old Rugged Cross. We'll put that in there today.
Well, that's great.
So, I know I can see that we could just talk for hours. Really.
Well,
You've got a lot to draw from. Really, it's wonderful. and I guess we'll leave it for another time. But
oh, sure.
I really thank you for your time and for putting yourself out there. It's not always easy, to it's easy enough to talk about things, but you're putting a lot of your heart into this thing, and I really appreciate that.
Well, the AV project, of course, is the major thing we're working on now.
Yes.
And the real leadership, of course, is coming from Dave Sale, and he's going to deserve a pile of credit when this gets done. But I joined the committee to do everything I could to help make it go, because I think the future, our future survival includes being able to deal with technology.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to have a future, that's where it's going to be. So that's my current involvement.
Well, I'm looking forward to see that's coming up fairly soon, isn't it? Now, people talked about coming together, the church opening up in early September. Is that true?
Well, the committee is working at it, and I think probably that's the goal, although I don't think a firm decision has been made.
No.
But there is a committee was struck at the last council meeting, and their job is to put together a plan and to bring it forward. Rhonda sits on that committee. I've forgotten who else.
Yes.
So yeah, we're working at it.
Anyway,
that's.
Yeah. So I'm gonna next time I go into the church, I'm going in there tomorrow morning to rehearse with Tony, and
Yes.
I'm gonna have a look around. I'm gonna look up the plaques. I'm gonna look at those seat covers, and
Yep.
I'm gonna appreciate them in a fresh way.
Yeah. There's more. I just gave you some of the highlights.
Oh yes, well,
there's more stuff in there that's there. But I appreciate you only got so much time. And
Well-
yes, I'm going into the church tomorrow morning for a few minutes too.
okay. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. Thank you very
Yep.
much, David, and
Yep.
all the
Good.
best. Talk to you
Good.
then.
Thanks very much.
All right.
Bye bye.
On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross, till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true, each shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross, till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross, and exchange